Hey, so today we're going to talk about the momentary button mode in the Phantasmal Force MIDI controller. So the Phantasmal Force has 16 buttons that can be configured in a number of ways, one of which is sending momentary CC messages when you press the button. I have these two buttons set up to do that. They're going to interact with this guy over here, which is a 1010 music blue box, and over here this is an Ono Sendai from Spherical Sound Society. It's sending a bunch of beeps and boops. I'll unmute it here. So that's going to carry on in the background while I demonstrate what this button mode does. So without further ado, let's check it out. So I have these two buttons set to control these two parameters over here. So when I press this guy, the FX1 send is going to kind of swing over and crank itself up. And when I press this guy, the FX2 send. So FX1 is delay, FX2 is reverb, and those are going to be moved by me pressing these buttons. So let's go ahead and just check that out. Turn this up. So here's FX1 send. Watch it there. So we can hear that delay send getting sent up. Let's try the reverb. Nothing happened. And I'll explain why in just a sec. Second press. So you can see these buttons are sending messages to here. I'm going to turn this guy back down. And we're going to go in the menu and we're going to go over every page of the momentary button mode. So this is the shift button. This is going to get you into the menu, and you're going to navigate the menu by turning this knob. This knob is not a rotary encoder. It's a pot. That means it has a hard stop on either side. Its position is always representing reality, whereas an encoder, it can just twist infinitely left or right. This does have hard stops. So I'm going to turn it around. And now it's going to actively show me where it's at. You can see there's this little white bar at the bottom of the display. That shows you basically where you're at in the menu. So if I turn it all the way to the right, that bar is all the way to the right. If I turn it all the way to the left, it's all the way to the left. So let's start at the right side. First setting all the way to the right is always going to be exit on any button mode. That's going to, if you press this button, it's going to send you back to the main screen. So let's hop back in. Okay. You're always going to start when you go into the menu. It's always going to be all the way to the left. So when I turn it, it's going to update and it's going to tell me where I'm at with that knob. So let's start that. Okay, we had the exit button. You can also see right down by that white bar is a little tiny number 2. That means we're currently editing button number 2. The first setting is going to be exit. Let's scroll back over, heading this direction. Now we're at the copy parameter where you can kind of copy in different ways a button you're currently editing. We'll talk about that in another video. Next setting over here is going to be boot. Now this is saying, like, when I plug in my Phantasmal Force, what is the preset that loads immediately? There are 16 savable presets that correspond to each of the 16 buttons. This is saying when I plug it in, it's going to load number 1, which corresponds to button number 1. To get in there and change that setting, you just hit the menu button. It's going to invert the colors, meaning, hey, I'm editing this parameter. And you can drive it around and say whatever you want. Okay, I'm going to just keep it on 1. Next setting over here. And you can see it kind of jumps around when you exit a setting because it reads where the current position of the knob is. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you kind of get a feel for it, it's fairly easy. TPS, taps. That's how many taps does it take to activate a button. So button 2 is currently set to 2 taps. Let's highlight that. It can be set to 1 or 2. Difference being, if you want to move around between buttons and kind of interact with that button without actually sending the message, you would want it on 2 taps. If you want a button to be immediately active, set it for 1. And you can see why once you start developing, your grid of button layouts, some of them may be 1 tap, some of them may be 2. But yeah, setting it for 2 taps allows you to navigate between buttons without actually sending information most of the time. Okay, so we've got taps. Let's take a look at how that works. So I'm kind of jumping back and forth between button 1 and 2, but it's not actually sending anything. Let's turn this back up. So let's kind of tap back and forth. Second button. Now I'm going to hit that second button again. Now I'm going to go over to button 1. Nothing happens. Let's press it. So by setting it for 2 taps, you can kind of jump back and forth. All right, let's go back to button 2. We're going to go back into our menu. I'm going to turn this guy down. Clock. So the clock can be sent, MIDI clock can be sent from the Phantasmal force, and it can be sent, well, let's look in the menu. You can turn it off. You can have it be sent via the TRS-A cable, or you can have it be sent via USB-C, or yeah, USB-C, or both. In this case, I'm not really doing anything with these momentary buttons that needs clock. There are tempo-based buttons that would benefit from sending or not sending clock. We're not going to talk about those till we get there. Those would be, you know, the LFO, pitch bend, ARP, CC LFO, things like that. So that's the clock setting. Next over is the BPM. That's related to the clock setting. So that's the internal clock of the Phantasmal force. So if you are running an ARP or something like that in here, that's the tempo at which the subdivisions would be derived from. And you can get in there, edit it, navigate around to whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. You won't really hear this influence what we're doing now because it's not a tempo-based button. Okay, so we've got BPM. Next one to the left, knob read. So these the next 2 settings are related, knob read and knob value. So for every button type, there's the potential that the knob can do something. Some button types, there's no knob activity, but for most of them there are. And for CC Momentary, there are 3 different possibilities for the knob. But let's just look at how the knob is read. So knob read, there's 2 options, jump or catch. And we're going to make sure these are both on catch. Button 1 is on catch, button 2 is on catch. Now we're going to hop back out and we'll demonstrate what that means. So these are both set to catch a value. Button 1 is set to catch at 22. That was the last knob value that was read on there. Button 2 is set to catch at 81. So I don't know where the knob is now, but in theory, it should not, this sending should not update until it hits 81. So right now I'm wiggling the knob, nothing's happening. I'm going to keep turning it up and up and up. Boom, there it hit 81 and now it's active. And now I can control the knob. So the knob right now, if we look in the menu, the knob mode is set to value. So on this button, it's set to value. Which we're on button 2. Let's turn it up. What does the value setting do? Well, it directly controls the value of that CC. So let's set it at like 93. Now I'm going to go over to button 1. And I'm going to move this around. Okay. Now let's say I did a bunch of stuff and now I came back to knob 2. Well, it still wants to be at 93. It's still set there. But what if I don't want to immediately jump to whatever the value of the knob is at now? Well, it won't, because it's set to catch, it will not update as I'm wiggling this until it hits 93. Keep going, keep it going, keep it going. Boom, there it hit 93. And now I have control of that knob. So essentially, the catch setting in here for the knob mode, for the knob read function, catch means don't update that knob until you catch the last value. Whereas, let's switch it to jump. Now it's on jump. And we're going to switch to another button. Switch it back. Well, it says the last read value of this knob was 16. But now, if I rotate the knob, it's going to immediately just jump to where it was. So I didn't have to find 16 and bring it up. So you have two options. Do you want that knob to just immediately start sending values, or do you want it to lock it into where it was last time, and when you sweep across that value, it will start to function? So those are your two options. Let's take a closer look at what some of the knob controls for the momentary button mode are. So right now we have it set to value, meaning I now have like fluid control over that CC number 64. Okay, let's switch. What are our other options here? Well, we can change the CC. So I find this to be helpful if I have a synthesizer and I'm not quite sure where a certain CC parameter is. I can now, with the knob, just change what CC I'm sending on. The button will still send its messages, but now it's going to send it to whatever CC I'm changing it to here. I find that to be helpful when exploring parameters on a new synth. They're trying to find, where was that again? Is it 43, 53? Instead of breaking out a manual, you can kind of explore your CC options pretty quickly that way. What else do we have? Let's get this guy back to where it was so we can... So I'm going to set it to 64. Okay. Another option, the final one, is solo. So, solo is kind of like the initial option we explored, value, except rotating the knob won't do anything in and of itself. And the button now does nothing. Either you'll see as I'm pressing the button, nothing is happening there. But if I press and hold the button and rotate the knob, so that allows you to queue up values. You can position the knob wherever you want, but it will not start sending values until you hold the button. And it stops sending those values when you let go. So we've talked about the different knob functions for a momentary button: value, CC, solo. I'm going to switch it back to value. So now we can talk about the actual momentary functionality of the button. So you have the down position when you've pressed the button down, and you have the up position when you let the button go. So the down position is that initial click, up is when you've let go. Right now, it's set to send a CC value of 115 on down, and 0, essentially turning it off, like letting go, it sends a 0. But you can set these for some other things. So let's explore that. Get in here. Once you get to 127, which is the max value, if you go past it, it'll say random, RND. So where are those random numbers coming from? Let's turn past our up, down. Now you'll find your min and max. Here's your min and max for the random number generator. So now, as I press button 2 down, every time I press it down, it's going to send a random number. And that random number will be between 0 and 127. But let's change that. Let's change that minimum number to, like, I don't know, 94. So now, when I press it down, it's going to send this little FX2 is going to move around between 94 and 127 or 115 or something like that. Let's check it out. Okay. You can set both the up and down positions in that with that setting of randomness. So if you're like pressing it or letting go, or both, you can have it set to random. And there's an additional setting beyond random, which is the current knob position. So that would mean as you're rotating this knob around, let's turn this up. So whenever I press this down, it's going to go to 124 because that's the current knob position. When I let go, it's going to go to 0. Or let's make it go... Oh, you can see my minimum number there when I'm rotating my knob is 94. How come I can only go from 94 to 127? Well, if you look in here, I've set my min to 94. So this min and max does two things. It sets the limits of random number generation, and it also sets the limit of the top and bottom of the knob. So you have some control flexibility there. The final setting for one of the up or down parameters. So we have random, the current knob setting, and then we have off. Maybe you don't want the button to do anything when it's pressed or when it's released. So those are options given to you there. And that's pretty much it. Past the min and max, you got the MIDI channel you're sending on, so every button can be sending on a different MIDI channel. There's your CC number, so 0 to 127. You can set this to send on whatever CC you want, which, as a reminder, can also be adjusted from the knob itself, so you don't have to dive into the menu. And then the mode of the button itself is the most furthest parameter to the left, and we're on MMT, which is a momentary button. And that's it.